Among the many fellow workers of Paul was a man named Aristarchus. But when you hear of this name, what comes to mind? Could you name what role he played in the unfolding of early Christian history? Who exactly was Aristarchus? What was his relationship like with Paul? Aristarchus was a co-worker of the Apostle Paul. His name means best ruler or best prince. He initially appears in the book of Acts during the Ephesus riot. The angry mob had seized Gaius and Aristarchus, who were described as Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia. Acts 19:29. Then the city was filled with confusion, and people rushed together as a group into the amphitheater, dragging along with them Gaius and Aristarchus, Macedonians who were Paul's traveling companions. Paul's evangelism had irritated Demetrius and other metal workers who made Artemis idols for a living. Making silver shrines to the false goddess Artemis was a lucrative business for Demetrius and other Ephesian silversmiths. As a result, when Paul's preaching in the city caused a significant number of people to abandon their unholy worship, Demetrius incited other craftsmen to join him. He warned them that Paul's preaching not only threatened their financial security, but also raised the possibility that their Artemis worship would be fruitless. Acts 19:21-27. Now after these events, Paul, determined in the Spirit that he would travel through Macedonia and Achaia, most of the Greek mainland, and go to Jerusalem, saying, "After I've been there, I must also see Rome and preach the good news of salvation." And after sending two of his assistants, Timothy and Erastus, to Macedonia ahead of him, he stayed on in the west coast province of Asia Minor for a while. About that time, there occurred no small disturbance concerning the way, Jesus, Christianity. Now a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of the goddess Artemis, Diana, was bringing no small profit to the craftsmen. These craftsmen he called together, along with the workmen of similar trades, and said, "Men, you are all well aware that we make a good living from this business. You see and hear that not only at Ephesus, but almost all over the province of Asia, this Paul has persuaded people to believe his teaching, and has misled a large number of people, claiming that gods made by human hands are not really gods at all. Not only is there danger that this trade of ours will be discredited, but also that the magnificent temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited, and that she whom all Asia and the world worship will even be dethroned and lose her glorious magnificence." Because the rioters couldn't find Paul, they captured Paul's co-workers instead. Aristarchus and Gaius were in a dangerous situation until the town clerk was able to convince the crowd to disperse. The city recorder finally put a stop to the commotion. It must have been a huge relief for Aristarchus and Gaius to hear him objectively admit their innocence, and then watch the chaos around them fade away. How would you have felt after such an experience? Would you have concluded that being a missionary companion of Paul was not for you, that it was too dangerous, and that you would be better off seeking a more peaceful life? Aristarchus did not think so. Aristarchus is mentioned as a Macedonian who resided in Thessalonica, the capital city. And being from Thessalonica, he likely was already well aware of the dangers of declaring the good news. When Paul preached in his city just a couple of years earlier, A riot broke out there too, and Aristarchus loyally stayed with Paul. Acts 27:2. In going aboard a ship from Adramyttium, which was about to sail for the ports along the west coast province of Asia Minor, we put out to sea, and Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, accompanied us. Little is known about Aristarchus's foundation or how he became a Christian, though some commentators believe he was a Jewish convert to Christianity. Either way, Aristarchus was a loyal companion to Paul, accompanying him on several journeys. Following the riot in Ephesus, Paul traveled to Greece and decided to come back via Macedonia. Acts 20:1-3. After the uproar had ended, Paul sent for the disciples, and when he had encouraged them, he told them goodbye and set off to go to Macedonia. After he had gone through those districts and had encouraged the believers, he came to Greece, and he stayed 3 months. And when a plot was formed against him by the Jews as he was about to set sail for Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia, northern Greece. Numerous men, including Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, as well as others, followed Paul on his way back through Macedonia. Acts 20:4. He was accompanied by Sopater of Berea, the son of Pyrrhus, and by Aristarchus and Secundus of the Thessalonians, and by Gaius of Derbe, and Timothy, and Tychus, and Trophimus of Asia. Afterwards, Aristarchus accompanied Paul on his first journey to Rome. However, it is unclear whether Aristarchus traveled all the way to Rome at that time. Acts 27:1-2. Now, when it was determined that we, including Luke, would sail for Italy, they turned Paul and some other prisoners over to a centurion of the Augustan regiment named Julius. And going aboard a ship from Adramyttium, which was about to sail for the ports along the west coast province of Asia Minor, we put out to sea. And Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, accompanied us. Paul later mentioned Aristarchus in his letter to the Colossians, saying, "Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, greets you, as does Mark, Barnabas's cousin." Colossians 4:10. Aristarchus, my fellow prisoner, wishes to be remembered to you, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas, about whom you received instructions. If he comes to you, welcome him. Aristarchus is last mentioned in the Bible in Paul's brief letter to Philemon. Philemon 1:23-24. Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus, sends you greetings, and so do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, and Luke, my fellow workers. Aristarchus's work as his companion in Christ was clearly valued by the apostle, as Aristarchus devotedly served the Lord. The Bible does not say anything about the rest of his life. Aristarchus is said to have been the bishop of Apamea in Syria, though his position is not mentioned in the Bible. Church tradition also includes Aristarchus's martyrdom during Nero's reign. Even though the Bible only mentions Aristarchus a few times, his background and later years are unknown. We do know that he was a devout Christian who served alongside Paul. The little biblical references to Aristarchus remind Christians that they do not have to be elevated to accomplish great things. We might not always be noticeable to others when we serve Christ, but the Lord sees and values us. Colossians 3:23-24. Whatever you do, whatever your task may be, work from the soul. That is, put in your very best effort, as something done for the Lord and not for men, knowing with all certainty that it is from the Lord, not from men, that you will receive the inheritance which is your greatest reward. It is the Lord Christ whom you actually serve. Aristarchus and others, according to Paul, were a strengthening aid, that is, a source of peace and comfort. Aristarchus was a true companion in moments of need by comforting and encouraging Paul. Being in the company and friendship of the apostle for several years must have been a very rewarding and spiritually nourishing encounter. We may never find ourselves in the same situations as Aristarchus, but with similar devotion to Christ and our fellow brethren, it is required of all Christians to be like Aristarchus. Matthew 25:34-40. Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" It is likely that fellow worshippers we know will face adversity or despair, possibly as a result of grief and loss, illness, or other trials. We can find joy and prove ourselves to be loyal companions by clinging to them and providing assistance, consolation, and encouragement.